Jack's family had always been a symbol of respect and dignity. His father, a well-respected merchant, had built their fortune through hard work and persistence. His mother, kind-hearted and loving, was the backbone of their home, ensuring that everything ran smoothly. Their lives were filled with happiness and prosperity, but little did they know that their world was about to shatter in an instant. It all began on one fateful journey across the sea. Jack's family had set sail for a business venture that would take them to distant lands. The sun was high, the skies clear, and the sea calm. But soon, everything changed. Out of nowhere, a group of pirates emerged from the mist, their ship a dark silhouette against the horizon. They approached quickly, with terrifying speed. Jack's father immediately realized the danger and commanded his crew to prepare for a possible fight. The pirates boarded the ship. Their leader, a tall, menacing man with an eye patch, raised his sword and demanded that Jack's father hand over all the riches they had on board. But Jack's father, determined not to lose everything he had worked for, refused. His voice was firm as he stood his ground, urging the pirates to take what they wanted, but leave them unharmed. "You will regret this, merchant," the pirate leader sneered. "Hand over your treasure, or we'll take it by force." Jack's father, a man of courage, moved to protect the goods with his life. The pirates, seeing this resistance, grew enraged. The pirate leader drew his pistol and fired at Jack's father, hitting him square in the chest. Jack's father fell, a look of shock on his face as his lifeblood stained the wooden deck beneath him. Jack's mother, horrified by the sight of her husband's death, screamed in desperation. She rushed toward the pirate leader, her face contorted in anguish. "No!" she cried out. "Take everything, just spare his life." But the pirate leader was ruthless. With a cruel laugh, he swung his sword through the air, and Jack's mother, caught off guard, was struck down. She fell to the ground, her body limp, her last breath escaping her lips as the pirates took everything they could. Jack, a young boy of just 10 years, watched the entire scene unfold. His heart was pounding in his chest, his eyes wide with terror. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. The only sound he could hear was the cold, merciless laughter of the pirates as they looted the ship and killed his parents. In that moment, Jack's world came crashing down. The ship was no longer a place of security, but a scene of horror and death. As the pirates raided the ship, Jack remained frozen in place, his small hands trembling, his eyes filled with tears. His mind struggled to comprehend what had just happened, but it couldn't. The image of his mother and father lying lifeless on the cold deck was seared into his memory. After what felt like an eternity, the pirates had taken everything of value. They began to leave, their laughter fading as they sailed off into the distance. Jack's heart ached with every beat. His parents, the people who had given him love and security, were gone. He was alone. The shock of the situation finally caught up with him. Jack's body went numb, his vision blurred, and before he knew it, he collapsed, unconscious from the overwhelming grief. The horrors of that day would haunt him for the rest of his life. As the sun set over the calm sea, the ship, now empty and abandoned, drifted aimlessly. Jack lay motionless, his mind lost in the memories of a life he could never have again. It was the beginning of a dark journey for him, a journey that would lead him into the depths of vengeance and loss. Little did Jack know, the traumatic events he had just witnessed would shape the man he was destined to become. Jack remained motionless, lost in the aftermath of the horror he had just witnessed. His parents, his entire world, had been taken from him in the blink of an eye. His mind was numb and his heart shattered. He felt an emptiness that he couldn't describe, only a deep, suffocating grief that consumed him. As the pirates sailed away, leaving destruction in their wake, Jack remained on the deck, unable to move. He could hear the waves gently lapping against the sides of the ship, but it all felt distant. Everything felt distant. His eyes were swollen from crying, but there were no more tears to shed. His grief had drained him completely. For hours, Jack sat there in silence, his young heart aching with the unbearable loss of his parents. Eventually, someone came. A man, a stranger to Jack, who had witnessed the devastation from a nearby ship. This man, who had been part of a larger crew, approached cautiously, seeing the young boy sitting alone on the deserted ship. The man had a look of compassion on his face as he knelt beside Jack. "Hey there, lad," he said gently, his voice soft but firm, trying to rouse Jack from his stupor. "I'm sorry for what you've gone through. You don't have to be alone." Jack's eyes slowly lifted to meet the stranger's. His voice, barely a whisper, cracked as he spoke. "They're gone. My parents. They're gone." The stranger nodded solemnly, understanding the depth of Jack's sorrow. "I know, boy. I saw what happened. It's not right, but I'm here now. I'll help you." Jack didn't respond. He felt empty, as though no one could ever understand his pain. But the man wasn't done. He didn't walk away. He stayed there with Jack, letting him process the overwhelming grief, offering his silent presence. After some time, the stranger spoke again, trying to offer a distraction, something to take Jack's mind off the terrible loss. "You need to focus, lad. You can't stay like this forever." With that, the man pulled out a small cage from his bag. Inside the cage was a stunning macaw parrot, bright green, blue, and yellow feathers gleaming in the fading sunlight. The parrot chirped softly, hopping around the cage as if sensing the sorrow of the boy. "I've got something for you," the man said, his voice soft. "This little one is a survivor, and now, so are you." Jack didn't quite understand at first. He hadn't been able to register the change, but the sight of the parrot, the life it held, was a distraction, a flicker of hope amidst his endless grief. The stranger opened the cage and placed the macaw gently on Jack's shoulder. The bird's soft feathers brushed against his skin, and for the first time in hours, Jack felt something other than the aching sadness. The macaw chirped again, tilting its head as if trying to comfort him, to show him that there was still life beyond the death and destruction. "You're not alone, Jack," the man said, his voice warm. "This parrot will be your companion. Let him be your friend, your guide. He can help you find your way." The macaw perched on Jack's shoulder, its bright eyes looking directly at him. Jack could feel the bird's warmth, the gentle vibration of its body as it flapped its wings. A small reminder that there was still something alive in this broken world. And so Jack, though still broken, slowly began to emerge from the depths of his grief. The macaw became his only friend, his only connection to a world that now felt so distant. Together they would begin a new chapter in Jack's life, one that was filled with pain, but also, in some strange way, a glimmer of hope. As Jack grew older, the memories of that day, the screams, the gunshots, the bodies of his parents lying lifeless on the ship's deck, remained seared in his mind. He couldn't escape them, no matter how hard he tried. Each night he lay awake, haunted by the faces of his parents, their final moments replaying over and over again in his mind. The grief never truly left him, but something else began to grow inside him as well, a burning need for revenge. The small, compassionate man who had saved him from complete despair and given him the macaw had disappeared soon after that fateful day. Jack was left with only his memories and the bright, intelligent parrot, who became his only companion. The bird, with its vivid colors and its uncanny ability to mimic words and phrases, was the only reminder Jack had of the kindness he had once received. But even the parrot's comfort could not suppress the dark thoughts that began to consume Jack. His heart had hardened with every passing year, and he began to believe that the only way to find peace to avenge his parents was to strike back at the pirates who had stolen everything from him. The image of the pirate leader, the man who had killed his father with a single shot, haunted Jack. His thirst for revenge was no longer a passing thought. It had become an obsession. "Someday I will make them pay." Jack would mutter to the parrot, his voice bitter. The macaw would flutter its wings in response, as if acknowledging Jack's growing resolve, yet offering no comfort. It was as if the bird knew that Jack's quest for vengeance would lead him down a dark and dangerous path. Jack's uncle, who had taken him in after the tragic loss, did his best to care for him, but Jack felt like an outsider in his own home. The man's attempts to console him were futile, and Jack distanced himself from him as much as possible. He would often wander alone, speaking to the macaw, confiding in the bird as though it were the only one who truly understood his pain. "It's not just about the pirates," Jack would explain to the bird, his voice cold and determined. "It's about everything they took from me, the love of my parents, my life as I knew it. I won't rest until I make them pay for everything they've done." The macaw, in its own way, seemed to encourage Jack's thoughts, even though it could never truly grasp the depth of his pain. Yet Jack, in his young mind, saw the bird as his only ally. The parrot was always there, by his side when he needed someone to talk to, offering an odd sense of companionship. As Jack's determination grew stronger, so did his connection to the macaw. The bird was not just a pet, it had become a symbol of Jack's lost innocence, his unyielding resolve, and his desire to make the pirates who had destroyed his world pay for their crimes. Jack's thoughts were no longer focused on his grief alone. Instead, he saw a path ahead, one that led to a new identity, one where vengeance would be the only thing that mattered. The idea of revenge consumed Jack, but so did the realization that he would need power to make it happen. He couldn't do it alone. He would need a crew, a ship, and the ruthless mindset of a pirate. And as Jack gazed out at the vast ocean before him, he knew that his journey was just beginning. Jack's 18th birthday came and went in a blur of indifference. He had grown taller, his features harder, his resolve even more unyielding. But in his heart there was still an emptiness, a void left by the loss of his parents. The passage of time had done little to soothe the pain. Instead, it had only fueled the fire of revenge that burned inside him. Jack knew one thing for certain. He couldn't continue living the way he was. He had no home, no family, and no purpose beyond the idea of making the pirates who killed his parents suffer. One fateful day, as Jack roamed the streets with his macaw perched on his shoulder, he was once again thrown out of his uncle's house. His uncle, weary of Jack's brooding and erratic behavior, had finally told him that he couldn't stay any longer. The words stung, but Jack had long since stopped caring. He gathered his belongings, what little he had left, and left without a second thought. The parrot, as always, was by his side. Without a place to call home, Jack wandered through the docks, aimlessly watching the ships come and go. His heart was heavy, filled with frustration and a longing for something more. The macaw, sensing Jack's internal turmoil, fluttered its wings and squawked, catching Jack's attention. "What's next for us, my friend?" Jack muttered, as if the bird could answer him. The macaw, though silent, had always been more than just a pet to Jack. It had been his companion, his voice of reason, and it had witnessed every dark thought that had passed through Jack's mind. Now it seemed to be guiding him towards something greater. One evening, as Jack walked along the docks, the macaw suddenly flew ahead of him, its wings slicing through the air with purpose. It landed on the mast of a nearby ship, looking down at Jack as if beckoning him to follow. Jack, intrigued and desperate for some direction, hurried to the ship, his heart pounding with anticipation. As he climbed aboard, the ship's crew gave him a skeptical look, but the macaw flapped its wings again and chirped loudly, causing them to step aside. They had seen the bird before, an intelligent, talking macaw that was known among the sailors for its uncanny ability to guide people. Jack made his way to the captain, a grizzled, weathered man who had seen his fair share of the sea. The macaw perched on the captain's shoulder, as though introducing Jack to him. The captain looked at Jack, sizing him up. "What brings you here, boy?" the captain asked, his voice gruff. "I need a place to stay," Jack said, his voice steady, "and I have a purpose." His eyes narrowed with determination. "I want to make those pirates pay for what they did to my family. I want to become one of you." The captain studied Jack for a moment, his eyes calculating. "You have the fire in you, lad, but piracy isn't for the weak-hearted. You'll need more than just vengeance." Jack nodded, not willing to back down. "I'm ready," the captain finally gave a small grunt of approval. "Then follow the bird," he said, nodding to the macaw. "He's smarter than most men I've known. If he's guiding you, you might just have a chance." And so Jack's journey as a pirate began. With the macaw as his guide, Jack knew he was no longer alone. Together they would carve a path through the seas, facing countless dangers, but always driven by one goal: revenge. The macaw had shown him the way, and Jack was ready to follow, wherever it might lead. The night was still and quiet as Jack sat on the edge of the ship, gazing out at the endless expanse of the ocean. The soft sound of the waves lapping against the hull was the only thing that broke the silence. His thoughts were clouded, the weight of everything he had experienced pressing down on him. He missed his parents, missed them with a ferocity that made his chest ache. The pain was constant, gnawing at him every waking moment. He knew what he wanted: revenge, but the path ahead seemed unclear, fraught with danger and uncertainty. Sitting beside him on the railing was the macaw, its feathers gleaming in the moonlight. The bird's sharp eyes looked out at the sea, seemingly as deep in thought as Jack. "How did it all come to this, my friend?" Jack asked quietly, his voice breaking the stillness. "I never imagined my life would turn out this way. I've become everything I hated." The macaw turned its head slightly, its bright eyes meeting Jack's, and let out a soft chirp, almost as if responding to him. Jack couldn't help but smile faintly. The parrot had been his constant companion, always there, always listening. It had seen him at his lowest, and now it seemed to understand him better than anyone else ever could. "I don't know if I can do this," Jack continued, his voice filled with uncertainty. "The pirates. They killed my parents, and I've been consumed by that hatred ever since. But now, I wonder if I've become like them. I've lost everything, and in trying to avenge them, I don't even recognize myself anymore." The macaw flapped its wings, chirping once more before hopping closer to Jack. Its beak tapped gently on Jack's arm, as if offering some form of reassurance. Jack's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, but one thing became clear: he couldn't go on like this. He couldn't let vengeance destroy him. He needed a purpose, something beyond revenge that would give him peace, something to fill the emptiness left by his parents' deaths. In that moment, the macaw spoke, its voice clear and almost human. "If you want revenge, Jack, you must become more than what you seek. The world of pirates is a ruthless one, but if you let your hatred consume you, it will lead to your own destruction. Vengeance is a path filled with darkness, but you must choose whether you'll walk it as a man or as a monster." Jack's heart skipped a beat. He had heard the bird speak before, but never so directly, never with such weight in its words. The macaw's intelligence had always been evident, but now it was offering him advice, wisdom even. Jack turned to the bird, his expression serious. "What do I do then? How do I balance what I need with what I am becoming?" The macaw chirped again, its voice soft but firm. "You must lead, not just with your anger, but with your heart. Take what you need, but do so wisely. Let your actions be guided by your purpose, not your pain." Jack sat in silence for a long while, considering the bird's words. Slowly, he stood up and placed a hand on the macaw's head, grateful for its guidance. "I will listen, my friend. I will not let my rage control me. I will become the man I need to be, one who honors my parents' memory without losing myself in the process." As the ship sailed into the horizon, Jack made a silent promise to himself. The journey ahead would not be easy, but with the macaw by his side, he would find his way. The path to revenge was still before him, but he would walk it with purpose, not blind hatred. And in the end, he would find peace, not just for his parents, but for himself. As the days passed, Jack's life aboard the ship grew more focused, more deliberate. The macaw, still perched on his shoulder, continued to guide him with wisdom that belied its small size. The bird had become Jack's mentor, teaching him the ways of the sea, helping him navigate the treacherous world of piracy, and most importantly, keeping him grounded in the midst of his obsession with revenge. The ship was Jack's new home, and the crew, though rough around the edges, accepted him into their fold. They recognized his determination, but more than that, they saw the spark of leadership in him. Jack began to grow into his role, learning the intricacies of ship life, from steering the vessel to understanding the complicated networks of trade and smuggling. However, Jack's drive for vengeance was never far behind. Every time he looked at the crew, he saw them as potential allies in his quest to destroy the pirates who had killed his parents. But the macaw, with its ever-watchful eyes, noticed Jack's restlessness. The bird would often speak to him quietly, urging him to look beyond his anger, to understand that there was more to life than revenge. Vengeance will only bring more darkness, the macaw would say softly, but a pirate's true strength comes from the ability to lead with purpose, not rage. Jack listened, but the gnawing desire for justice, for retribution, never fully left him. He spent hours on deck, alone with his thoughts, running through different ways he could exact his revenge on the men who had destroyed his family. Yet he found that with each passing day, he was becoming more like the pirates he had once hated, the very thing he had sworn never to become. The macaw, ever the patient teacher, continued to steer Jack towards a more balanced path. A pirate's greatest asset is not their sword, but their mind, the bird would remind him, always pushing Jack to think before acting. It wasn't long before Jack began to realize that the macaw's advice had merit. In a world where violence and aggression ruled the seas, Jack started to see that his greatest strength lay not in his desire for revenge, but in his ability to outthink his enemies, to plan and execute strategies with precision. One day, after a tense altercation with a rival pirate crew, Jack found himself standing on the edge of the deck, staring out at the horizon. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the water. He turned to the macaw, who sat calmly on the railing beside him. "You were right," Jack said quietly. "I've been letting my anger control me. But I'm starting to see that there's more to this than just getting back at the pirates who killed my family. There's more to life than revenge." The macaw tilted its head as if acknowledging Jack's change in perspective. It chirped softly as if satisfied with the progress Jack had made. Jack took a deep breath, the weight of his grief still heavy, but now tempered by a sense of clarity. "I'll still make them pay, but I'll do it my way," he muttered to himself. "I won't lose who I am in the process." The macaw hopped closer, landing on Jack's shoulder once more. Jack smiled, his resolve hardening into something far more dangerous and controlled. He was no longer a boy consumed by grief. He was becoming a pirate, a leader, and a man of purpose. With the macaw by his side, Jack knew the path ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that he was ready to face it. With his mind sharp and his heart focused, he was ready to claim his place in the pirate world, and, more importantly, ready to reclaim his life from the darkness that had once threatened to swallow him whole. Under the watchful guidance of the macaw, Jack's transformation was becoming more evident with each passing day. He was no longer just a young man seeking revenge. He was learning the ways of the sea, building a reputation, and understanding the power of strategy over brute force. The macaw, whose intelligence surpassed that of most men, had become his closest advisor, leading Jack through the complexities of piracy with its sharp wit and calculated approach. One afternoon, as Jack stood at the bow of the ship, staring out at the endless expanse of water, the macaw fluttered down beside him. The bird's bright eyes seemed to gleam with excitement. "It's time," the macaw chirped, its voice sharp and clear. "The ship you've been waiting for is near. The riches you seek are within reach. But you must be careful." Jack turned to the bird, his expression focused. "What do you mean? Is this the ship that can give us what we need?" The macaw nodded, flapping its wings excitedly. "Yes, it is. It's a merchant ship, heavily laden with gold and precious goods. The crew is small, and they're not prepared for a fight. But you must act swiftly." Jack's heart raced with anticipation. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The macaw's plan was simple. They would hijack the merchant ship, take its treasure, and then use it to strengthen their crew and their position. The macaw had already gathered intelligence on the ship's route, its cargo, and the weak points in its defense. "Get ready, Jack," the macaw instructed. "You'll need to lead your crew with precision. It's not just about taking the ship, it's about doing it without unnecessary bloodshed." Jack nodded. He had come to understand that piracy wasn't just about violence. It was about control, timing, and strategy. With the macaw's help, he had learned how to command respect and execute plans with a calm, calculated approach. This was his moment to prove that he could lead not just with force, but with intelligence. The crew gathered on deck, preparing for the hijacking. Jack addressed them with confidence, his voice steady. "Today, we make our mark. We're taking that ship and we'll do it cleanly. No unnecessary bloodshed. We are pirates, but we are also men of strategy." The crew, though rough around the edges, had grown to respect Jack's leadership. They moved quickly and quietly, ready to carry out the macaw's plan. As the merchant ship appeared on the horizon, the macaw flew ahead, scouting the route. It returned moments later, its wings flapping rapidly. "Now, Jack," the bird said, its voice low and commanding. "They are close. We attack now before they realize what's happening." Jack gave the signal and the crew sprang into action. They approached the merchant ship under the cover of night, their small, fast boat cutting through the water with speed. The element of surprise was on their side. As they neared the ship, Jack could see the crew of the merchant vessel, unaware of the imminent danger. Their guards were lax, their attention divided. In one swift motion, Jack and his crew boarded the ship, overwhelming the few defenders with ease. The macaw perched on Jack's shoulder, its sharp eyes scanning the scene, ensuring everything went according to plan. The crew swiftly secured the ship's control, and the treasure was theirs. With the ship now under Jack's command, he stood tall, a sense of accomplishment settling over him. The macaw had been right. This was the moment that would change everything. Jack was no longer just seeking revenge. He was building an empire, one step at a time. The macaw, as always, had led Jack to victory, guiding him not just with knowledge of the seas, but with the wisdom that had turned Jack from a grief-stricken boy into a calculating pirate captain. This was only the beginning. With each victory, Jack's confidence grew, and with the macaw by his side, there was no limit to what he could achieve. With the successful hijacking of the merchant ship, Jack's transformation was nearly complete. The once grieving young man, who had been consumed by the need for vengeance, was now a formidable pirate. Under the watchful eye of the macaw, Jack had gained the trust and respect of his crew, proving that his mind, not just his thirst for revenge, was his greatest weapon. The crew's success brought them wealth and a stronger position in the world of piracy. Jack's name began to spread across the seas, and the macaw's guidance played a significant role in their rise. The bird was not just a companion, it was a vital part of Jack's strategy, always advising him on the next steps, pointing out weaknesses, and calculating risks. With the parrot by his side, Jack learned to command with both wisdom and ruthlessness. However, Jack's growing reputation came with a price. The more power he gained, the more his behavior began to change. The quiet, reflective pirate who had once doubted his path was now someone different. As he commanded his crew through raids and ambushes, Jack started to revel in the violence, in the fear he struck in the hearts of his enemies. He was no longer just seeking revenge for his parents' deaths. He was beginning to enjoy the chaos, the domination of the seas. The macaw, ever observant, noticed this change in Jack. The bird had always urged Jack to focus on strategy and purpose, but it saw that Jack was becoming more aggressive, more bloodthirsty. The parrot had been a constant source of guidance, but now it sensed that Jack was slowly drifting away from the path of reason. One evening, as Jack stood on the deck of their new ship, gazing out at the vast ocean, the macaw fluttered to his side. The bird chirped softly, drawing Jack's attention. "Jack," the macaw said, its voice calm but serious, "you're losing yourself in this. The anger is consuming you." Jack turned to the bird, his eyes cold. "What do you mean? This is who I am now. I'm in control. I've taken what's mine." The macaw tilted its head, its sharp eyes studying Jack. "You've taken what was stolen from you, yes. But in doing so, you're becoming the very thing you sought to destroy. Revenge is a dark path, Jack. It leads to nothing but more pain." Jack felt a brief flicker of doubt, but he quickly pushed it aside. His mind was clouded with the thrill of his power, and the memories of his parents' deaths were buried under the weight of his newfound authority. He had the ship, the crew, and the riches. What more could he need? But the macaw wasn't finished. Remember who you were before all of this. A man seeking justice, not vengeance. A man who wanted to protect, not destroy. Jack's expression hardened. The past is gone, macaw. My parents are dead, and the pirates who killed them will pay. The macaw sighed softly. Then be careful, Jack. If you let the anger take over, you will lose everything, including yourself. Jack didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze back to the horizon. The macaw's words lingered in his mind, but they were drowned out by the roar of the sea and the promise of more power, more revenge. In that moment, Jack realized he had become a force to be reckoned with, but he also understood that the road ahead was fraught with danger, not just from his enemies, but from the darkness within himself. The macaw had warned him, but Jack was too far gone to listen fully. The pirate captain had been born, but at what cost? And as the macaw perched quietly by his side, Jack couldn't help but wonder if he had already lost more than he had gained. The line between justice and vengeance was becoming harder to see, and Jack was dangerously close to crossing it entirely. The Red Sea was known for its treacherous waters and violent storms, but it was also a place where the fiercest pirates roamed. Among them was Mary, the ruthless pirate who had played a direct role in the destruction of Jack's parents. Mary's crew had once been involved in the raid that stole everything from Jack, and now she was a notorious pirate captain known for her cruelty. Jack had heard whispers of her presence in the Red Sea for months, and he knew that he couldn't rest until she was brought to justice. The tension in the air was palpable as Jack and his crew, guided by the macaw's intelligence, set sail toward the heart of the Red Sea. The ship was well prepared, its sails billowing in the wind, ready for whatever battle lay ahead. The crew was eager, driven by their loyalty to Jack and the promise of revenge that had sustained them all these years. The macaw perched on Jack's shoulder, its eyes sharp, constantly surveying the horizon. The bird had been quiet for most of the journey, perhaps sensing the gravity of the situation. It was clear that this battle would not be an ordinary fight. It was personal. Jack had waited too long for this moment, and he wouldn't let anything stop him from confronting Mary. As the sun began to dip beneath the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the sea, the lookout cried out, "Ship ahoy!" The crew scrambled to their positions, their hearts racing as they saw Mary's ship approaching. It was a dark, imposing vessel, its black sails billowing in the wind. Mary's ship was a symbol of terror, known to strike fear into the hearts of anyone who crossed its path. Jack's eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on the wheel as he steered his ship toward her. The two ships drew closer, the tension mounting with every passing second. Jack could feel his pulse quicken, his anger rising as he thought of his parents' deaths. This wasn't just a fight for loot, it was a fight for justice. This was his chance to avenge the deaths of the people who had meant everything to him. "Steady, everyone," Jack called out, his voice firm but filled with the weight of the moment. "We strike now, and we strike hard. Remember, we're not just taking a ship, we're taking revenge." The macaw let out a sharp squawk, as if in agreement, and Jack could feel the bird's energy match his own. The bird had been by his side through every battle, always guiding him with its keen intellect and sharp instincts. As the ships collided, the crew of Mary's vessel rushed to the deck, their swords drawn. The air was thick with the sound of clashing metal and the screams of battle. Jack's crew fought fiercely, but it was clear that Mary's men were seasoned and ruthless. The fight was brutal, the sea running red with blood as the pirates clashed. Jack's focus was unwavering as he pushed through the chaos. He fought with the fury of a man who had lost everything, his every strike fueled by the memory of his parents. He could hear Mary's voice cutting through the noise, shouting commands to her crew. Finally, Jack spotted her, standing on the far side of the deck, her black coat fluttering in the wind, her eyes cold and calculating. She was the one who had killed his parents, the one responsible for the suffering that had consumed his life. He could see the hate in her eyes as she saw him approach, and for a moment, their eyes locked in a battle of wills. "This ends tonight," Jack snarled, raising his sword. Mary laughed, her grin wide and cruel. You think you can take me down, boy? You're just like the rest of them. But Jack was relentless. With one swift move, he lunged at her, the battle raging around them. It was a fight of pure hatred, each blow filled with the weight of years of grief. Finally, with a powerful thrust, Jack drove his sword into Mary's chest, ending the reign of terror she had caused. Her body fell to the deck, and for the first time in years, Jack felt a sense of closure. As the battle subsided, Jack stood over her, breathing heavily. The ship was theirs, but the victory felt hollow. He had avenged his parents, but it hadn't brought them back. He was still the same man he had been before, haunted by loss, driven by revenge. The macaw landed on his shoulder, its sharp eyes watching him. You've done it, Jack. You've avenged your family, the bird said softly. But remember, this is only one battle. The war within you is far from over. Jack nodded silently, his gaze fixed on the sea. He had won this fight, but there was still a long road ahead. The journey of vengeance was far from finished, but for now, he had taken his first step toward redemption. After the bloody confrontation with Mary, Jack stood at the bow of the ship, gazing out at the sea. The waters had calmed, and the once vibrant sky was now a dull gray, mirroring the heavy weight in his chest. His parents were avenged. The pirate captain who had destroyed his life lay lifeless at his feet. And yet Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The macaw perched on his shoulder, as always, watching Jack with keen, intelligent eyes. The bird had been Jack's closest companion throughout his journey, guiding him through every difficult decision, and despite the victory they had just secured, the macaw seemed to sense the emptiness that still lingered within Jack. You've done it, Jack, the macaw said softly, its voice surprisingly gentle. Your parents would be proud. Jack didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on the horizon, the sight of the endless sea making him feel both small and lost. The revenge he had sought had not brought him the peace he expected. It had given him a fleeting sense of satisfaction. But the deep ache of loss still lingered in his heart. I've killed Mary, Jack muttered under his breath, his voice distant. But killing doesn't bring them back. It doesn't fill the hole inside me. The macaw tilted its head, sensing Jack's inner turmoil. Revenge is a bitter drink, Jack. It may quench your thirst for a time, but it never fully satisfies. You're chasing something you can never truly have. You can't undo the past, but you can choose what to do with the future. Jack closed his eyes, letting the wind whip through his hair. The macaw's words rang true, but Jack didn't know how to move forward. His life had been defined by the need for vengeance, and now that it was over, he felt as though he was adrift in a world that no longer made sense. Just then, a voice broke through the silence. Quite the impressive display of strength, a man said, stepping onto the deck. He was tall and lean, with weathered skin and a look of experience in his eyes. Jack didn't recognize him, but there was something familiar about the man's presence. He had the look of someone who had sailed the seas for far too long. Jack turned to face him, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. Who are you? The man gave a small, knowing smile. I'm Marivelle, he said, his voice calm but with an edge of authority. I've been watching you for some time, Jack. Your journey, your transformation. You've become something formidable. Jack instinctively reached for his sword, his hand hovering at his side. You've been watching me? He repeated, his tone sharp. And why would that be? Marivelle didn't flinch. I've been following your path, Jack. I know what you've been through, and I know the choices you've made. You've taken revenge, but that doesn't mean the fight is over. There's always more. The pirates you've killed, there's a whole world of them out there, and I think you know that. Jack clenched his jaw, irritation flaring within him. I don't need your advice. I've dealt with the men who took my parents from me. Marivelle stepped closer, his eyes locking with Jack's. It's not just about them, Jack. It never was. You're fighting something much bigger than any one pirate. You're fighting the part of yourself that seeks vengeance, that never stops until it's taken everything in its path. The words hit Jack like a punch to the gut. The anger flared within him, but deep down he knew Maribel was right. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about something deeper, about the darkness that had overtaken his soul. The macaw chirped softly, as if urging Jack to listen. Jack stood there for a long moment, considering Maribel's words. It was true. He had let his rage define him, and now that the fight was over, he was left with nothing but the aftermath. Maribel's voice cut through the silence. I'm not here to make you feel better, Jack, but I can offer you something more. A way out of this endless cycle. You've got the skills, the heart, and the crew. You just need a purpose. Jack met Maribel's gaze, feeling the weight of the offer. For the first time in a long while, he wondered if there was more to life than vengeance. Tell me more, Jack finally said, his voice steady but uncertain. He was ready for a new direction, a new purpose, if only he could find it. The macaw, perched on his shoulder, watched the exchange, a silent witness to the transformation that was beginning in Jack's heart. The journey wasn't over, but it was about to take a different turn. The sky above was overcast and the air had turned heavy, thick with the scent of impending storm. Jack stood at the helm of the ship, his eyes scanning the horizon as the crew worked tirelessly to maintain their course. The recent victory had not brought the satisfaction he had hoped for. Despite avenging his parents, he still felt unsettled. The quest for revenge had only led him to more battles, more bloodshed, and now an uncertain future. As Jack stood there, deep in thought, the macaw perched on the railing beside him, its feathers rustling slightly in the stiff breeze. The bird had become quieter of late, almost as if it too was sensing a shift in the air. The crew, busy with their duties, didn't notice the subtle change, yet Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then the lookout's shout cut through the air. Captain, something's wrong with the ship! Jack's heart sank. His crew had been dealing with numerous issues of late, but this felt different. He turned quickly and made his way to the deck, the macaw fluttering behind him. What's happening? Jack demanded as he reached the ship's bow. The first mate, a seasoned sailor named Eric, was already there, his face pale with concern. Water, Captain. It's coming in fast. The hull's been breached. Where? Jack asked, his voice sharp. Below the waterline, Eric replied, pointing toward the lower decks. It looks like we've hit something, possibly a hidden reef or some debris we didn't see in the storm. But it's coming in faster than we can pump it out. The realization hit Jack like a punch to the gut. The ship was sinking. His heart raced as he quickly took command of the situation. Get the pumps going. Don't stop until we're sure the water's under control. I want every man on deck and ready to work. The crew scrambled into action, but the weight of the situation settled over Jack like a cloud. His mind raced, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. The ship had been in fine condition when they took it, and yet here they were, facing disaster. Jack made his way below deck, with the macaw following closely behind. The creaking of the ship and the sound of rushing water filled the air. The damage was worse than anticipated. There was a steady flow of water coming in through the lower hull, and the crew was struggling to keep up with the pumps. We need to seal the breach, Jack said, his mind working quickly. If we don't, we're done for. The crew worked with desperation, using planks, nails, and ropes to try to seal the damage. Jack stood at the center of the chaos, his thoughts focused and calculating. This wasn't just about saving the ship. It was about saving everything he had built. The crew, the journey, his own soul. But then, amidst the chaos, the macaw squawked and flew to a narrow, unseen part of the ship. It hovered over a small crack in the hull, barely noticeable amidst the chaos of the flooding. Jack, the macaw's voice echoed in his mind, urgent and clear. Down here! Jack followed the bird, his heart racing. He knelt at the small crack, inspecting it closely. The water was coming in faster from this spot than anywhere else. It was small, almost too small to notice, but it was the root of the problem. Get the tools, Jack shouted to the crew, his mind working quickly. He had to seal this before the ship went under. The breach was more serious than they had first realized. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. The water continued to pour in, and Jack's heart raced as he worked with the crew to plug the hole. They worked feverishly, sealing it as tightly as possible, but it was a race against time. Finally, with a final push, they managed to seal the breach. The water began to recede and the pumps slowly began to regain control. But Jack knew this was only a temporary solution. The ship was damaged, and they had been lucky this time. As the last of the water was pumped out, Jack stood at the helm, his mind still spinning. The immediate crisis was over, but the ship was far from safe. The damage had been done. They would need to dock soon for repairs, and Jack knew that the journey ahead would be far more dangerous than he had anticipated. The macaw landed beside him, its sharp eyes watching the horizon. Jack looked at the bird, and for the first time in a long while, he questioned whether revenge had been the right path. The battle had been won, but at what cost? And what would the future hold for him and his crew? "Let's keep moving," Jack muttered, his voice low. "The storm may have passed, but the sea always has more to throw at us." The macaw chirped softly, its feathers ruffling in the wind. Jack knew the road ahead would be treacherous, but with his crew and the bird by his side, he would face whatever came his way. The ship had survived, and so would he. The storm had come without warning. The winds had whipped up out of nowhere, and the sea had turned violent, churning beneath the ship as waves crashed against the hull. Jack stood at the helm, his eyes narrowing against the harsh wind as his crew scrambled to secure the ship. The rain was coming down in torrents, the lightning illuminating the stormy sky in flashes of white. But Jack's mind wasn't just focused on the storm. He had to focus on the ship, which was already damaged from the earlier breach. The macaw had perched on the mast, keeping a sharp eye on the situation. The bird's feathers flapped furiously in the wind, but its keen eyes never wavered. It had always been Jack's most reliable companion, guiding him in times of danger. As the storm raged, the bird's gaze fixed on something below deck, and its sharp instincts told it that something was wrong. Jack could feel it too. The creaking of the ship beneath him, the way it groaned under the strain of the waves. It wasn't right. The ship had already been damaged earlier when they had sealed the breach. But Jack knew there was more to it. Something wasn't stable. Something worse was coming. Suddenly, the macaw squawked loudly, snapping Jack out of his thoughts. It took off from the mast, swooping down beside him with an urgency that sent a chill through his spine. "Jack, below deck!" The macaw's voice rang in his mind. "There's water coming in again." Jack's heart sank. He had hoped the damage from earlier had been resolved, but the ship was sinking again. There was no time to waste. The crew was still working frantically to keep the ship afloat, but the storm made everything more difficult. "Eric!" Jack shouted, his voice cutting through the howling winds. "We need to get below deck, now!" Eric, the first mate, nodded, his face grim, and rushed to Jack's side. "What's happening, Captain?" "The ship's taking on water again," Jack replied, his voice filled with urgency. "We need to find the breach before it's too late." The two of them raced below deck, the sound of rushing water growing louder with every step. As they reached the lower deck, the water was already knee-deep. The damage was worse than Jack had imagined. The ship had struck something again, and this time, it wasn't just a minor crack. It was a major breach, one that threatened to tear the ship apart. "We need to seal it off now!" Jack shouted, his voice filled with determination. But as he looked around, he realized the breach was in a place that was nearly impossible to reach, deep in the hull, under the heavy beams. "Jack!" The macaw's voice echoed in his mind again. "There's a way! Follow me!" The macaw flew ahead, darting through the flooded corridor, guiding Jack and Eric with swift precision. The bird led them to a small, narrow passage that they hadn't noticed before, tucked away behind a stack of crates. The water was rushing in from the crack below, but Jack could see a small opening in the hull, just enough to stop the flow. Jack and Eric worked together, using every tool they had to seal the opening. The pressure was mounting, the water rising faster than they could manage, but Jack remained calm. The macaw perched nearby, watching closely, its sharp eyes never leaving the situation. The bird squawked once more, a final command as Jack tightened the last bolt into place. For a moment, everything stood still. The sounds of the storm outside, the roaring wind, and the crashing waves faded into the background. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow, his chest heaving with exhaustion. The breach had been sealed. The ship groaned, the pressure lifting from the hull as the water finally began to recede. Slowly but surely, the flooding stopped. Jack looked up at the macaw, who had been right, again. The bird had guided him to the spot, showed him the way, and now the ship was safe. Jack exhaled deeply, his hands trembling from the effort. He knew they weren't out of danger yet. The storm still raged above, and they had to navigate through the chaos to find calm waters. But for now, the immediate threat had passed. "We owe you one, old friend," Jack said quietly, turning to the macaw, whose eyes gleamed in the low light, as though proud of the victory. The macaw chirped in response, its wings fluttering in satisfaction. Jack felt a deep, unspoken connection with the bird. It had saved them once again. As the storm continued to howl above, Jack realized that the true strength of their crew wasn't just in their weapons or their numbers. It was in the bond they shared, with each other and with the macaw. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but with the bird's guidance, Jack knew they could survive whatever the seas threw at them. For the first time in a long while, Jack allowed himself a moment of peace. The battle had been won, not through sheer force, but through the sharp mind and instincts of the macaw, the companion who had been with him from the beginning. And Jack knew, in that moment, that the road ahead might still be treacherous. But as long as they had each other, they could weather any storm. After the ship had been saved, Jack stood at the helm once more, watching the storm begin to calm. The waters were still choppy, but the worst had passed. The crew worked hard to stabilize the ship, patching up the remaining holes and making sure the sails were in good condition. Yet despite the relief, Jack's mind was clouded. His heart still felt heavy, weighed down by the loss of his parents and the violence that had followed. Even after avenging their deaths, he found himself uncertain about what came next. The macaw, perched on his shoulder, seemed to sense Jack's turmoil. The bird had been a constant source of comfort and wisdom, but even now, with the immediate dangers behind them, Jack felt restless, as if something vital was still missing. "Jack!" came the voice of Marivelle, breaking the silence. Jack turned to see him approaching, his expression unreadable, but there was a glint in his eyes, a mixture of pity and understanding. "Marivelle," Jack said, his voice hoarse. "What now? The battle is over. I've done what I set out to do, but I don't feel finished. Is this it? Is this all there is?" Marivelle stopped beside him, looking out at the horizon where the storm had started to clear. "I've seen that look before, Jack. It's the look of someone who's reached the end of their path, but doesn't know where to go from here." Jack clenched his fists at his sides, frustration bubbling inside him. "I thought revenge would give me peace. I thought it would make me feel better, but it hasn't. It's only left me emptier. I've killed the man responsible for my parents' deaths. But what now? Is there something left for me in this world?" Marivelle's face softened, his eyes turning toward the crew, busy below deck. "Revenge can never bring you peace, Jack. It's a shadow that always follows, always clouds your judgment. But vengeance alone doesn't define you. Your actions from here on out do. What you choose to do with your life is what will shape who you become." Jack felt a weight settle on his chest as he processed Marivelle's words. The fight for revenge had consumed him, yes, but now that the dust had settled, he realized that he was standing on the edge of something new, a choice. He had spent so long chasing shadows, chasing the past. But what about the future? What would it be like if he let go of the hatred that had controlled him? "I've lost so much," Jack whispered, his voice barely audible against the quieting wind. "But I still don't know how to move forward. I don't know if I can change." Marivelle nodded slowly, as if understanding Jack's struggle better than anyone. "It's not about forgetting the past. You can never forget, nor should you. But it's about learning to live with it, to honor it by making something of the life you have left." The macaw, as though echoing Marivelle's sentiment, let out a soft chirp and fluttered its wings. Jack glanced at the bird, his heart swelling with a sense of gratitude. It had been there through every dark moment, guiding him, keeping him grounded. It was more than just a bird. It was a symbol of his journey, of survival, and perhaps of redemption. "So what now?" Jack asked, turning to Marivelle. Marivelle gave him a knowing smile. "The seas are full of opportunities, Jack. You've learned to lead, to command respect, and to survive. But the true test comes when you decide what kind of leader you want to be." Jack stood there for a moment, reflecting on the words that had been spoken. His life was no longer just about vengeance. It was about who he would become moving forward, what legacy he would create from the ashes of his past. Finally, Jack nodded, a sense of resolve settling within him. "You're right. It's not over. It's just the beginning." Marivelle placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "That's the spirit, lad. You'll figure it out. Just don't let the darkness consume you. The future is yours to make." As Jack looked out at the horizon once more, he felt something shift inside him. The journey had been long, and it had cost him everything. But now, for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to step into a future of his own making. The macaw, ever the wise companion, perched proudly on his shoulder, as if in silent approval. And as the ship sailed into the calm, clear waters ahead, Jack finally understood what it meant to truly be free.